There's a barn somewhere right now with a piece of TV history rotting under a tarp. Maybe the Batmobile, maybe something just as legendary. And the owner has no idea what's parked inside. It's happened over and over with the cars that defined American television. But here's the thing, the studios threw these cars away for pennies. It took regular people to find them again. And the last car on this list, bought for $1, sold at auction for $4.6 million. That $1 car isn't even the craziest story on this list. Let's get into it. Number 10. Hunter's 1985 Dodge Diplomat. Rick Hunter and D.D. McCall tore through Los Angeles for 7 seasons in a dark, unassuming Dodge Diplomat, and NBC leaned on a rotating fleet of them for the chase scenes, most of which got beaten to death doing exactly what cop show cars are built for. When the series ended in 1991, the surviving fleet went through a messy studio liquidation, and most Diplomats just melted back into used car lots, unrecognizable once the light bar came off. One primary chase car vanished completely, and for 25 years, nobody could confirm a single surviving Hunter Diplomat existed. That changed in 2015 when a Bakersfield collector bought what looked like an unusually clean Diplomat and noticed a welded mounting bracket under the rear bumper that matched camera rig documentation from a retired NBC prop coordinator. A faded paint code under the trunk liner sealed it. The $22,000 restoration brought back one of the only confirmed surviving cars from a show that mostly exists now in reruns and memory. Number 9. Mannix's 1967 Oldsmobile Toronado. Before Magnum PY, there was Joe Mannix, and the car that made him look like the coolest man in LA was a 1967 Oldsmobile Toronado. Front-wheel drive, a 425 cubic inch V8, and a silhouette that looked fast standing still. CBS ran several Toronados across 8 seasons, and when the show ended in 1975, one of the primary hero cars simply stopped appearing in any collector's records after 1979. It resurfaced in 2011 at a Glendale estate sale, listed as a vintage Oldsmobile, non-running. A Mannix historian recognized the two-tone paint from a production still and a welded reinforcement plate under the driver's seat, added for camera equipment, matched the VIN to CBS fleet records exactly. The $54,000 restoration produced one of maybe 3 confirmed surviving Mannix vehicles left in existence. Number 8. Charlie's Angels 1976 Ford Mustang Cobra II. Farrah Fawcett only stayed on Charlie's Angels 1 season, but the white and blue Ford Mustang Cobra II her character drove became almost as iconic as the poster that made her famous. Ford supplied several for the show, and when Farrah left, the cars used for her driving scenes scattered into studio inventory with barely any tracking. One of the 2 hero cars disappeared so completely that collectors debated for years whether it had even survived. In 2016, a Riverside woman posted photos of her late father's unfinished project car, and Charlie's Angels collectors immediately recognized the stripe pattern and hood scoop from Season 1 photos. Ford's build records confirmed the VIN as one of the 2 cars assigned to Farrah's stunt double. The $61,000 restoration now tours Mustang shows, giving fans who idolize Jill Monroe a chance to stand next to the real thing. Number 7. Hardcastle and McCormick's Coyote X. If you were a kid in the mid-1980s who cared even a little bit about cars, you remember the Coyote, the wedge-shaped, kit car-styled machine that Mark McCormick drove on Hardcastle, and McCormick, built specifically for the show by a custom shop working directly with the production. The Coyote was never a mass-produced vehicle. It was essentially a purpose-built television prop dressed up to look like some impossible mid-engine supercar America never got to build. And the production commissioned exactly 3 of them for the show's 3-season run. When the series ended in 1986, 2 of the Coyotes were sold to private collectors almost immediately, but the primary hero car, the one used in the most stunt work and the most damaged from years of jumps and chase sequences, went into storage with a prop house and simply got lost in inventory paperwork when the company changed ownership twice over the following decade. A car hunter who specialized in tracking down obscure television prop vehicles finally located it in 2009, sitting disassembled in a Van Nuys storage unit that the prop house had stopped paying rent on years earlier, with the body panels separated from the chassis and half the custom fiberglass work cracked or missing entirely. Because the Coyote was such a unique, low-production custom build, authentication was actually more straightforward than most cars on this list. There simply weren't other Coyotes floating around to confuse with the real one, and the chassis number matched build documentation the original fabrication shop had kept for decades. The restoration was brutal, costing $118,000 and taking 6 years because entire body sections had to be hand-fabricated from scratch using nothing but production photographs as reference. When it debuted at a car show in Burbank in 2015, it was reportedly the first time all 3 surviving Coyotes had ever been photographed together. And for a show that's mostly forgotten by mainstream audiences now, the reunion meant everything to the people who never stopped loving it. Quick side note, most car problems come from small things people overlook. I put together a simple longevity guide based on everything I've learned, and it walks you through exactly what to watch for. It's linked in the description below. Number 6. Vegas's 1957 Ford Thunderbird. Dan Tana's Cherry Red, 1957. Ford Thunderbird might be one of the most underrated hero cars in TV history, mostly because Vegas itself gets overshadowed by flashier detective shows from the same era. But that Thunderbird was gorgeous, a genuine American classic even by 1978 standards, cruising through Las Vegas with the top down while Robert Urich looked like he owned the entire strip. ABC actually used an original unmodified 1957 T-Bird for the show, rather than commissioning custom builds, which made it relatively easy to acquire but genuinely hard to track once production wrapped, since it was just a normal car that happened to have a television career. When the series ended in 1981, the primary hero car went back into the classic car market through a private sale with zero documentation connecting it to the show, and it essentially disappeared into the massive population of surviving 57 Thunderbirds, one of the most collected American cars ever built. For over 3 decades, nobody could definitively prove any surviving Thunderbird was the actual Vegas car because there was nothing structurally unique about it to search for. Until a production researcher going through ABC's old contract files in 2013 found a specific paint mixing formula requisition with a partial VIN reference attached. Cross-referencing that partial VIN against California title, records eventually connected it to a Thunderbird sitting in a private collection in Henderson, Nevada, less than 15 miles from where the show actually filmed. The owner had bought it in 1985 with no idea of its history and had simply been enjoying it as a beautiful classic car for nearly 30 years. Once the connection was confirmed through matching bodywork modifications used for camera mounting during driving scenes, the car became one of the only fully documented Vegas vehicles in existence, and it still lives in Nevada today, which feels appropriate for a car that never really left home. Number 5. The Fall Guys 1982 GMC Sierra Grande. Colt Seavers' black and orange GMC Sierra Grande pickup might be the single greatest truck in TV history. And if you grew up watching Lee Majors launch that thing off ramps and through billboards every week, you understand exactly why this one hurts to talk about. 20th Century Fox destroyed dozens of Sierra Grandes during the show's 5-season run because The Fall Guy was, at its core, a show about a Hollywood stuntman, which meant the truck had to actually perform the stunts. Real jumps, real crashes, real destruction, week after week. Most of the fleet got wrecked beyond repair, and when the show ended in 1986, the handful of surviving trucks scattered into studio sales with almost no paperwork, because nobody in 1986 imagined anyone would care about tracking a television pickup truck decades later. One of the primary hero trucks, the one used for the majority of close-up driving and the famous opening sequence, went completely dark for over 25 years. Before we get to number 4, I need you to hit that like button right now if watching these cars come back from the dead is giving you chills, because that means more of you get to see this video and more of these stories get told. Drop a comment telling me which one of these you'd want to find rotting in a barn. I read every single comment, and I want to know which show hit you the hardest growing up. And if you haven't already, subscribe and hit that notification bell, because we've got more of these lost and found car stories coming, and you do not want to miss the next one. Okay, let's keep going. That Fall Guy truck finally turned up in 2012 when a Nevada scrapyard owner posted photos online asking if anyone recognized a weird orange-striped GMC he'd pulled in on a routine tow, planning to crush it for parts within the week. A Fall Guy fan community spotted the post within hours and immediately recognized the specific orange stripe pattern and roll cage configuration from the show's opening titles. The scrapyard owner, stunned that people were offering him real money for what he thought was scrap, sold it to a collector for $9,000, an absolute steal, who then spent $87,000 over 4 years rebuilding it, sourcing an original roll cage design from a retired Fox stunt coordinator who still had his notes from 1982. The finished truck now tours stunt driving exhibitions, and there's something perfect about a truck built to survive crashes, surviving the ultimate crash of just being forgotten by everyone for 25 years. Number 4. Adam 12's 1968 Plymouth Belvedere. Adam 12 wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. The show followed 2 LAPD officers in a standard-issue black-and-white Plymouth Belvedere, and it became one of the most influential police procedurals in television history precisely because it felt real. The car was exactly what real LAPD officers drove, right down to the department-issue paint and equipment. NBC used actual retired LAPD patrol vehicles for filming, repainted, and lightly modified for the show's needs, which meant these cars had entire histories before they ever appeared on camera, and even less documentation after. When the series ended in 1975, most of the fleet went back into municipal auction or got scrapped entirely as outdated patrol equipment, and the specific units used for the show's most memorable driving sequences were never tracked separately from ordinary retired squad cars. A police memorabilia collector in Torrance spent nearly a decade combing through LAPD surplus auction records trying to isolate which VINs matched the show's production window. And in 2017, he finally connected a Belvedere sitting in a private garage in Lancaster, bought decades earlier by a retired officer who'd simply wanted an old patrol car as a keepsake, to specific fleet documentation from the show's second season. The owner had no idea it had ever been on television. He just always liked driving it. Authentication came through matching an unusual radio equipment mounting bracket, welded in specifically for the production's sound department, against a photograph from a 1970 behind-the-scenes magazine spread. The car needed only minor cosmetic restoration since it had been so lovingly maintained, and it now makes appearances at law enforcement memorial events, honoring both the show and the real officers it was built to represent. Number 3. Knight Rider's car. The Trans Am nobody wanted to remember. Everybody remembers Kit. Almost nobody remembers Car, and that's exactly what makes this story so strange. Car, Knight Automated Roving Robot, was introduced as Kit's darker prototype twin in a single second season episode, an identical 1982 Pontiac Trans Am with a cold, self-preserving artificial intelligence instead of Kit's heroic programming. Universal built the car unit using the same base modifications as the Kit fleet, and because the character only appeared in a handful of episodes across the series, almost nobody thought to track what happened to the car once its limited screen time ended. It simply got absorbed back into Universal's general prop inventory, and according to studio records that surfaced decades later, was very nearly sold for scrap value in a 1988 equipment liquidation because nobody filling out the paperwork realized what it actually was: A Knight Rider historian tracking Kit T-related vehicles in the early 2000s stumbled onto a reference in old studio disposal logs to a Trans Am, black, non-scanner, minor customization sold to a salvage buyer in 1988 for less than $400 and spent nearly 6 years trying to trace where that specific vehicle ended up. The trail led to a Nevada desert property in 2015, where the car had been sitting exposed to the elements for over 2 decades. The body panels sun-bleached and the interior completely gutted by rodents and weather. What confirmed it as the actual car unit, rather than just another customized Trans Am, was a unique hydraulic mounting point behind the dashboard, identical in engineering to the Kit vehicles, but installed in a mirrored configuration specific to cars' screen appearances. The restoration cost $103,000, and today, car sits parked next to a restored Kai TT at conventions as a genuine matched pair. The good twin and the bad twin, both saved from the scrapyard decades after everyone assumed only one of them mattered. Number 2. The Dukes of Hazzard's Daisy Dukes Jeep, Dixie. Everybody obsesses over the General Lee, and fair enough, but Daisy Duke's canary yellow Jeep CJ7, nicknamed Dixie, was every bit as central to the show's identity. The vehicle Daisy drove every single week while the boys were off jumping the General Lee into creek beds. Warner Brothers used multiple CJ7s throughout the show's 7-season run, and because the Jeep wasn't destroyed nearly as often as the Chargers, you'd think tracking survivors would be easier. It wasn't. The production sold off the Jeep fleet in smaller, quieter batches compared to the massive, well-documented Charger liquidations, and the specific Jeep used in the most memorable early-season episodes essentially vanished after a 1983 studio equipment sale that barely generated any paperwork at all. For nearly 30 years, the Dukes of Hazzard collector community debated whether an authentic hero, Dixie, had actually survived, until a barn cleanout in rural Alabama in 2013 turned up a heavily modified yellow CJ7 that a farming family had been using for actual farm work for decades, completely unaware of its television past. The Jeep had been repainted twice, had a homemade truck bed welded onto the back for hauling feed, and looked nothing like its television self at first glance. What cracked the case was a specific reinforced roll bar configuration requested by Warner Brothers stunt coordinators for safety during the Jeep's more aggressive driving sequences, which matched internal production memos a Dukes historian had been sitting on for years. The family had no idea what they'd been using to haul hay bales, and when they found out, they agreed to sell it for $34,000 to a Dukes superfan who spent the next 3 years and another $71,000 turning a farm workhorse back into the Jeep that made a generation of viewers wish they had a cousin named Daisy. Number 1. The Batmobile, Batman's 1955 Lincoln Futura. Here's the one that ties everything together, because this isn't just a lost and found story. It's arguably the greatest survival story in the history of American automotive pop culture. In 1965, customizer George Barris needed to build a Batmobile for the upcoming Batman television series in just 3 weeks. An insane deadline that would have been impossible if he hadn't remembered a strange, forgotten concept car sitting unused in a Los Angeles storage lot. That car was the 1955 Lincoln Futura, a one-off Ford Motor Company show car with a bubble canopy and space-age fins that had already appeared in one movie and then simply been abandoned, gathering dust and losing value year after year. Barris bought the entire one-of-a-kind concept car for $1, a piece of Detroit engineering history practically given away because nobody thought it was worth anything anymore, and transformed it into the single most recognizable car in television history in less than a month. Think about that for a second. The car that became the Batmobile was already a lost and forgotten vehicle before it ever became famous. a genuine one-of-one prototype that Ford itself had essentially discarded, sitting in storage worth less than scrap value until somebody looked at a piece of forgotten history and saw exactly what it could become. When the original Batman series ended, Barris retained ownership and kept the car touring for decades, which is part of why this one never suffered the same disappearance as everything else on this list. But it still nearly vanished from public reach entirely when Barris considered breaking up the fleet of Batmobile replicas he'd built over the years to fund other projects. In 2013, the original screen-used 1966 Batmobile, built from that $1 Lincoln Futura, sold at Barrett-Jackson auction for $4.62 million, the highest price ever paid for a television vehicle at that point in history. A car that started as trash, saved by one man's imagination, sold for the price of a mansion, and the whole thing happened because somebody refused to let a forgotten piece of Detroit engineering rot away in a parking lot. That's not just a car coming back from the dead, that's the entire story of American car culture in one vehicle. Nothing is really worthless if the right person sees what it could still become. 10 more cars, 10 more miracles, from a Nevada scrapyard to a farm in Alabama, to a $1 concept car that turned into the most valuable television vehicle ever sold. Every single one of these was minutes away from being crushed, scrapped, or forgotten forever. And every single one survived because somebody out there refused to let a piece of American television history disappear. That's really what this whole series is about. These cars aren't just props. They're the machines that made us fall in love with driving in the first place, whether we grew up wanting to be Colt Seavers or Daisy Duke, or just the kid dreaming about riding shotgun in the Batmobile. If this video took you back, do me a favor and hit that like button, because it genuinely helps get these stories in front of more people who grew up loving these same shows. Drop a comment and tell me which car on this list surprised you the most. I promise I read every single one, and I love seeing which of these hit closest to home for you. Subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss the next part of this series, because trust me, there are plenty more of these incredible finds still to come, and if you want more stories like this one, click the video right there on your screen. I think you're going to love it just as much as this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.